Welcome to another whiteboard training video. I'm Isaiah with Cheeky Scientist, and today I want to talk to you about 6 funny interviewing blunders that PhDs, including myself, have made. So if you are going to your first site visit, you may have read something that said, okay, you want to go there, you got to answer questions, be prepared, and you read online the different interview questions that you could be asked, how to answer them, etc. This is not where you're going to find, this is not where you're going to blunder. This is not where most PhDs make mistakes. Where most PhDs make mistakes is their attitude, how they act, not realizing that during the entire interview they're being evaluated, even during lunch, even during the post-presentation 1 or 2 beer phase. All of these things really matter, so I'm going to break this down for you and make sure that if you show up to a site visit after doing all of that work to finally get an in-person interview, that you don't blow it. So, number 1, the biggest mistake that I see PhDs make, they come to me all the time and they say, I don't know what happened. And then we replay what they did during their site visit. Even during mock interviews, this comes up. They play it too cool. You might not think that this is a problem for PhDs, playing it too cool, but it is. As a PhD in academia, you've been taught to not be impressed by anything. You've been taught not to really show emotion, right? You want to evaluate data dispassionately. You want to explore all your options, not get too excited. You don't want the other side to think that you're desperate, etc., which makes no sense because most PhDs will be very desperate through the entire job search process, and then they get to a site visit and they try to act calm, cool, like they're not even enthusiastic about the job. Don't do this. When you get to in person, when you're interviewing people that are at the company, when you're meeting the team there, you want to act like you just won the lottery. Like just being on site at that business is what you've been waiting your whole life for. Doesn't mean you jump up and down and you scream and you do the whole rah-rah thing, but you show some enthusiasm with your face when you're talking. You say how excited you are to be there, how you've waited, for the last however many years, or how your training has led up to this, you working at that company. And again, this just comes through in the little nonverbal things, the nonverbals that will ultimately determine whether or not you're hired. So for example, raising your eyebrows, nodding, smiling, the active listening, right? Telling them that you're really engaged in what they're doing. You really like the new project they're describing to you. Whatever they're saying during the interview, hanging on their every word, okay? Going all in terms of your attitude. This is important. Sometimes as PhDs we think that if we're too enthusiastic, that we're going to turn people off. But the truth is, every person you turn off by being too enthusiastic, you're going to turn off 100 by not being enthusiastic enough. An employer who's going to pay you 60, 70, 80, 1,000, if not more, to work there every year wants to know that you really want to be there, that you're excited to be on the team. And if you can't show that for a single day, how quickly do they think your enthusiasm is going to fade after the first 2-3 months? Okay, so show that enthusiasm, be engaged, active listening, hang on their words. It's all an important part of the process. Number 2, exploring their options on site. Right, as PhDs, and I've done this myself, I went to a job interview and they were asking me about the position, but then they started asking me about other positions. They're like, well, what about this other position? Would you be interested in doing that? And then they started asking me why this position. And I was in this academic state of exploration, of everything being a possibility, right? I was in a theoretical state, not a practical state. And I explored. I said, oh, I could do that. I could see myself doing that. I could see myself going down this path too, etc. I thought they would be very pleased. After all, this is the kind of talk that really pleased my PI. He loved when I just explored options and we talked about the theory, whatever scientific field. This is not what they want you to do. They're bringing you there for a reason. They're going to pay you money so that you come in and hit certain milestones, to achieve certain goals. So there's a very practical side of this. You have to show them that you're certain about this job you're applying to. There's no debate in your head. You're not going to leave 6 months later. You want this job and this job only. You're completely dedicated to it. Most of you are not showing that kind of certainty. Again, as PhDs, we're taught to keep all of our options open. Don't do this. Even if you're interviewing for other jobs, that's fine. You're supposed to do that. But when you're there, tell them why you want that job. Every job has pros and cons, so focus on that job's pros and say, because for these reasons, this job is my first choice, whatever the pros are for that particular position. Number 3, being patient with follow-up. Something that we deal with a lot in our Cheeky Scientist Association is new members come in, and some of them are fresh off an interview where they haven't heard back. And so we say, well, when did you follow up? Some of them say, oh, well, I didn't follow up at all until a week later. What? Others say, oh, I followed up right after, but then I haven't talked to them for a couple of weeks. I didn't know when to follow up. Are you crazy? You need to be following up for that position. Show them how bad you want the job. Doesn't mean you're calling them on the phone every 3 hours, but you don't wait 2 weeks. You don't wait a week to follow up after the initial interview. You follow up right away to everybody that you talk to. And then like 2-3 days later, I would follow up again. And then when you're following up, ask them when you can expect to hear back from them. And if they say a couple of weeks, whatever, don't wait a couple of weeks. Reach out, add value, send nice messages. There's something that you talked about with them. It could be something more on the personal side, like they like dark roast coffee, right? So you tell them about a new dark roast coffee that's out, or they told you they like reading books by Richard Branson. You know, you could mention the newest book by Richard Branson, or it could be more professional. They told you about a new project they're working on. Maybe you read a publication or something about that project. You send that article to them. Find ways to keep yourself top of mind, because if you're not top of mind, somebody else is, and they're going through the list. And people often make hiring decisions based on how they feel and whoever is the last person they thought about or had contact with. So keep following up. Number 4, making demands. So we talk a lot at Cheeky Scientist about knowing your value and being sure not to just agree with everything, which I'm going to talk about in the 6th point. But one of the biggest blunders you can make is going in and not thinking that you're ultimately replaceable, because everybody's replaceable, especially before you've been hired. And you don't want to be aggressive or draw ultimatums. This is just going to upset other people and make them not want to work with you. Even when you're negotiating your salary, it's got to be win-win. You got to always be positive, always be bringing the conversation about back to the work you're going to do for the employer and how excited you are to work there. Okay, yes, you can exchange concessions, you can talk about terms, you don't have to agree with everything, you have to know your worth, but don't make demands, don't get into like some sort of competitive, I'm going to get this out of you mindset, because that's going to derail the interview. Number 5, forgetting you're on camera. One of the interviews that I did, one of my first jobs out in industry, I was flown in for a full-day site visit, and I was staying at this hotel that was like an affiliate hotel for the company. And they gave you a certain allowance for breakfast, etc. There was a lot of people there being interviewed for multiple positions at that company. Then we were driven to the site, and we were dropped off in the parking lot. Then we came in and we met the person at the front desk, the receptionist. We were there for a while. That person ended up asking us just some casual questions about the weather, etc. And then the real interview, as we thought, started. What I found out later, because I was hired by this company and I saw the other side of it, was that we were being evaluated even at the hotel. The people at the front desk of the hotel were getting calls from the company asking how they were treated, how nice the people that were checking in were. Can you believe that? Okay, that's some serious intel. Not only that, there were cameras on the parking lot. They would watch how people got out of the cars with the drivers, how polite they were. They would interview the receptionist afterward to see how polite each candidate was. The interview is on the entire time. Assume that it's on as soon as you step on the plane, if you're flying to a site visit, as soon as you get to the hotel, as soon as you get on site. Whatever they've set up for you, assume that the interview has happened. Certainly during the day, they're going to try to relax you and see who you really are. During the lunch break, during breaks in between walking from one interview to the other. After the presentation, they might make you stay a little bit longer. They'll try to give you a drink or two just to see, the other side of you. Always keep your game face on, so to speak, okay? Always be your most professional self the entire interview. Do not make this mistake. And finally, being a yes person. Don't just agree with whatever the interviewers say. There are studies that show that agreeableness is inversely proportional to your career trajectory. Instead, you want to politely challenge things that are brought up, right? You want to make sure that you're discussing what you actually want. What I mean by this is if they say, are you willing to work nights and weekends? Yes. Are you willing to do this? Yes. Have you ever done this before? Yes. After a while, they're going to see that there's not much more to you than just your ability to agree with whatever they're saying. You want to challenge them. You want to bring up options. You don't want to explore options in terms of the position. Stay certain on that like we talked about. But you want to make sure that you're telling them actually what you need, right? Be realistic, because you're going to have to work there. Be realistic in terms of the work-life balance. Be realistic in terms of, the milestones that they're setting out before you and your ability to achieve them, your skills, etc. Okay? Don't be afraid to challenge a little bit what they're saying. Don't be afraid to ask questions. In fact, any interview you go to, they're going to turn to you and they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? And that's where they're going to be evaluating your competence, your ability to challenge them, ask questions, dig in to what you need to know to make this a successful career for you. Hopefully this helps you. If you have any questions, let me know in a comment below. As always, remember your value as a PhD and start thinking and acting like a successful industry professional.